Gary, I want to thank you, buddy, for saying something that clarifies something that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. The Lord did not spill his blood. That's accidental. When we say that, every time I hear that, I kind of cringe, because it's not an accident. That was fully intentional. It's something that he sacrificed, didn't spill. So thank you. The buck stops here. You know, I don't know how many years I've been wondering just exactly what that means. Buck stops here. I wondered, is that a bucking horse? Is that a dollar? What is that? The buck stops here. And here? Here or where? Where's here? You know, when you say here and you say it, I know what that means. It means here. But when you read it, what does that mean? What does it mean? Unless it's on a desk or something. That's where it really became famous, was on a desk. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the where of this buck stopping has to do with whoever is in charge. And why? Well, that's kind of a silly question, you know, because when you stop and think about it, the person that it stops at is the person who is in charge. So who is that? Well, I mean, how would you determine who's in charge? Let's read in Psalms 103. Because I think there's one place we need to start. Always need to start with the ultimate in charge. In Psalms 103, it begins with this statement. The Lord, and this word Lord right here is not master, not ruler. This is Yahweh. This is Jehovah right here. The Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his sovereignty rules over all. Sovereignty. That's a strange word. We don't use that word an awful lot. I really love words, because words, you know, they always have a history. There's always some meaning or some origin of a word. If it's not one of those eternal things, it has to have an origin. And in Genesis 1:28, I can see the origin of both of these things, that the rulership of everything starts in heaven. That's where God established his throne. And he is the ultimate where the buck stops. But in verse 28 it says, and God blessed them, that's us, mankind. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. We've been reading this a lot lately, but we need to read this a lot, because this is the start of everything. It's the start of responsibility. It's the start of possibility. It's the start of everything. It's the start of the chances to go wrong. Fill the earth and subdue it. Conquer it. Make it yours. And rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Wow, that's a lot of responsibility that was given to Adam and Eve, and in turn to us. We were given sovereignty. Sovereignty. Anybody know what that is right there? That is the first British sovereign. King Henry VII had this minted right after the War of the Roses, right after a split in England. They were trying to bring everybody together under one king, and he had this minted after that war was over to show the central government and the power behind it, and where the wealth actually came from. British sovereigns, the money that would answer to no one. It became the money of the realm, and it became the ruling money of the world for a while. It was the power behind the throne. You know, trying to figure out how to express what this is all about, what the buck stops here actually means. And I was thinking about, it's kind of like life is like one of these kits that you buy at Home Depot. And you take it home. Once you buy it at Home Depot and you take it home, it's yours, right? Home Depot has no more to say about that, nor does the manufacturer have anything more to say about that shelving unit that you just bought, that you're going to build yourself. They don't care if you hang it from the ceiling upside down. Unless, of course, you're going to try and hold them responsible for why the cans won't stay on the shelf. That might be a problem. Because with every sovereignty, unless you're talking about God, there's a higher authority. Once you buy it, once you have authority over it, you can do whatever you want to with it. You're in charge. You, me, we're in charge of our lives. God gives us this life. You have sovereignty over it. It's yours. You can actually skip the instructions. My sweet wife, Anna, she used to get so aggravated with me because I would get so, now I see that elbow. I saw that. She would get so upset with me because I'd have parts left over. She said, "What's that for?" "Oh, we don't need that." Well, they put it in there. You should have. What was it for? Did you read the instructions? I don't need no stinking instructions. I mean, Amen. I mean, that's the way men, well, some men think. I know a few here that don't read the instructions every time. Make me feel like an idiot. And maybe I am. Maybe I am an idiot when I don't read the instructions. Here's the thing. When you buy that shelving unit, it's engineered so that it'll hold what it's supposed to hold if you build it the way it's supposed to be built. They got that long shelf and a brace in the middle. Don't need that brace in the middle. I'm not going to put anything that heavy on it. But you know what? I can build it that way and I can use it that way. And everything will be honky-dory unless I put too much on it in the brace and then I want to take it back. Because when I take it back, they'll say, "What about the brace that was supposed to be in the middle?" "Well, I didn't need that brace." "Yes, you did need that brace." "Well, you're going to give me a new one?" "No, I'm not going to give you a new one because you should have put the brace where the brace was supposed to be. And since you didn't put the brace where the brace is supposed to be, you don't get a new one." It's the warranty rule. The warranty rule means that you're in charge, but you're also responsible. That's the but here about you can skip the instructions. But now I wanted to say but if I wrote it that way, it would be boot, and I hadn't quite figured that one out yet. So this is supposed to be but. Don't forget the buck, because the buck stops when you have authority and responsibility for something. Some don't know about the buck. Where do we get names like that for things? Where do we get the name, the buck stops here? I always thought it started with President President Truman. Nah, he got it from a couple hundred years before him. It didn't start with him. He just made it famous. He's the one that had it in a plaque on his desk that said the buck stops here, because he knew as president he was responsible for the decisions that he made. He couldn't pass that to anybody else. He was the one that was responsible. Here's the buck. Did you know this is where that came from? This is the buck that was passed that started that saying. Strange beginnings for some things. Where did Truman get that? It started in the Wild West, and there's a couple of different things that the buck had as an origin that we're going to look at, because all important sayings have something important behind them that usually winds up being something that is of value. So, in the Wild West, the buck was a buckhorn knife. How did that get to be what Truman said, the buck stops here? Well, it started out as something kind of... It didn't start out anything like what he used it as. It was something frivolous in nature. It started with poker. A poker game. Where when somebody was going to be the dealer and in charge of the pot, this buckhorn knife would be placed in front of him so that everybody at the table and everybody watching the game would know who was in charge of dealing the cards and overseeing the pot. A responsibility is what it was. It had no negative connotation yet. It was a simple rotation of responsibility. Went around the table and went around the table. And sometimes someone would say, I pass. They didn't want to deal the cards. They didn't want to be responsible for the pot. So they would pass it to the next person. It was passed to the next person in the rotation unless that person didn't want the responsibility. And that was so everybody could watch the person who was in charge, watch them really carefully, because they're the ones in charge of the pot and they're the ones dealing the cards. You got to watch them, you know. So here's the thing. Since they're in control of the pot, they had everything that had to do with the game on their shoulders. They're the ones in charge. Sometimes a person wouldn't want that responsibility, and like I said, they would pass it to the next person. So the words pass and the word buck took on some serious meanings back in the old Wild West. And like I also said, these things quite often happen because these things are associated with something of value. So why a buck? You ever heard the statement, a buck ain't worth what it used to be? Ain't that the truth? Not worth what it used to be. But there's always an exchange rate. And when you think about this, the basis of this statement came from, I found this out from this article Today I found out. I have found more ways to learn stuff in the last few years. Now my big problem is sorting it to make sure that I'm snooping it and make sure that what I learn is the truth. Okay, but here, this was written by David Hiskey back in 2014, and here's what he said about the origin of of the value of a buck. Okay. So one of the earliest references of this, that's the use of this term, was in 1748, about 44 years before the U.S. dollar was minted. Before there was a dollar, there was a buck. What did it mean, though? It says, and it was used where it was a reference to the exchange rate for a cask of whiskey traded to Native Americans being $5, referring to deer hides. 5 deer hides was the price of a cask of whiskey to trade to Indians. So they give the deer hides and they get the whiskey, and they go off happier than they need to be, and somebody goes and makes leather coats. Interesting. It says yet in another document reference from 1748, a man named Conrad Weiser. Now I say Weiser because I think, not sure, but I think this is the man who went to Weiser, Idaho and settled there. So I think that's the thing. It says, he said something about traveling through the present-day Ohio and noting in his journal that someone had been robbed of the value of $300. The value of $300. It didn't mean it was 300 deer skins. It meant it was the value of 300 deer skins. What do I mean by that? It says, in addition, when the skin was from another animal, the number of skins required to equal a buck varied based on the animal and the quality of the skins. So you got the small change here. You got the buck and you got the small change. That is, for the 6 high-quality beaver skins were equal to a buck. So that's like, well, not like a quarter. What would 6 be instead of a quarter? I haven't figured that one out. A hex? You got all of this small change. And rabbits, it took 12 of them, 12 good ones, to equal a buck. That's where we came up with this term, a buck. What's that got to do with anything? Not since Andrew Jackson's administration was that anything like this ever discussed around the White House table, I'm sure. I can just about guarantee you it's never been brought up in the Trump dining room or the Biden household, and if he becomes president, it won't be used there. Not like a dinner conversation we had at Jan and Charlie's. Charlie? We were looking up the meaning of names the other night, and the meaning of Carol is Charles. She says, I like that a whole lot better than I do Carol. Why don't you call me Charlie? So I'm introducing you to Charlie here, folks. We talked about the value of a buck. We talked about the value of deer hide. We talked about the value of passing the buck. What it means to not take responsibility for your act. Those are the kind of conversations that go on around a dinner table with people who are down to earth, who think about real values, values that have been passed to us by the Almighty. So passing the buck. What does that mean? In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 11 through 14, I want you to read what Solomon says, and I want us to think about it for a little bit. He said, the words of wise men are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. He's talking about the Bible. But beyond this, my son, be warned that the writing of many books is endless. How many books are there in the Library of Congress? How many are worth reading? I mean, there's a lot of good books. There's a lot of trash. There's a lot of truth. And there's a lot more misinformation when it comes to books. He says, an excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. You can wear yourself out reading. Be careful what you read, because therein is information is going into you. I had an eldership one time where they got a letter about someone, a 60-page letter, most of it bad. One of the elders took it, handed it back, and said, I don't want to read that. I don't have any idea how true that is about a man that I've known for 10 years. I don't need that to know what this man is like. And one thing about it, when I read it, I can't unread it. So what we put in our head stays there, and it's hard to get out. It's kind of like when you have a bias about something. It is so hard to wipe that off your brain and start over fresh and learn something new. It's so much better. Jake made a statement one time, I first learn, best learn? He said, no. First learn, hardest to remove. What was that you said? How was it you said that?
I think it's both.
First learn, hardest to change. Because it's there, it's almost indelible in your mind. So whatever you put in there is so hard to get out and put the right stuff in. Be careful what you read. Here's the conclusion, Solomon says. Now this is Solomon, the wisest man before Jesus that ever lived on the earth. Solomon has given us cliff notes of the Bible. Cliff notes. Reader's Digest version. Here's what he says about the Bible. He says it's the instructions for the warranty. He says the conclusion, when all has been heard, when you take all of these prophets and writers of the Bible and other writers, the conclusion that you should come to is that God, fear God and keep His commandments, because this applies to every person. You want to know where the buck stops? The buck stops with every person. I was reading something where President Trump got all filleted for saying that the buck stops with everyone. It does. It stops with everyone because you're responsible for you. Your dad's not. Your mother's not. Your children aren't. Nobody is going to stand in judgment before God for you but you and me. I'm the one that's going to answer for me. Now, other people are going to answer for what they did to me or how they didn't help me, and I'm going to stand in judgment because of what I said that misled you, but you are responsible for everything you put in here and hold as truth. Nobody else is going to answer for you but you. So he says, for God will bring every act to judgment. Everything which is hidden. Nothing's going to be left out. Whether it is good or evil. This is what Solomon says is the conclusion of everything out there. Fear God. Because the buck stops with Him. Even the buck He gave me stops with Him. Just remember who stops the buck. It's God. Who establishes real value? How do you establish real value? You know, I woulda, shoulda, coulda. You know that saying, woulda, shoulda, coulda. I woulda, I shoulda, I coulda. I could have found some way to buy property here 6 years ago. Big dummy. How could I not do that? Marty was smart enough to do that. Julie, she probably poked Marty into doing that. They did it. They did it and I didn't. What is wrong with me? The buck stops here. I'm responsible. I just didn't do it. And life is not like a garage sale, you know. You know what I mean by that? A garage sale? Solomon knew what that meant. In Proverbs 20, here's what Solomon said is the way life is. Bad, 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 says the buyer. But when he goes his way, hey, did you see what I got for this? Oh man, I stole this. We say, no. We run down the value here and talk about what a great deal we got over here. But there's not going to be any of that with the judgment day. Because everything's going to be based on the value that is set by the one that stops the buck. He establishes the value of a deer hide, of our hide. He's the one that understands whether we've done good or whether we've done evil. So in Galatians 6, where Gary read, I want to read again. Brethren, even if anyone is caught in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. Now, here's how what I was talking about applies. We're not responsible for how they got where they are. We're responsible for helping them. We're not going to answer for their sin, but we're going to answer for our sin of not helping them like this if we were supposed to. He says each one, that's individual. That's not a group. There is no congregational salvation. You can't be saved because you're part of a group. Well, the church, but that's not what this is. It's not talking about a congregation. We're saved because we're in Christ. But that's an individual thing. That's us being born again into that and then living that life is what that's all about. Here he says, you who are spiritual, restore such a one, looking to yourself, lest you also be tempted. We're responsible for ourselves. He says, bear one another's burdens and therefore fulfill the law of Christ. You know what law he's talking about? That law in Matthew 22 where he was asked, what's the great and foremost commandment in the law? He said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Isn't that what this was talking about right here? Bear one another's burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ. James calls it the perfect law of liberty. That is, we're free to do whatever we want to do. We have the buck. But the warranty demands that we put that brace in there. That's what this is talking about. He said, for anyone who thinks he is something when he is nothing. You know, we can compare ourselves to somebody. I can always find somebody that makes me look good. Even with no teeth, I found a guy yesterday that worked on my truck that has less teeth than I do. You can always find somebody to make you look good. You can always find someone that's a bigger sinner. You can always find somebody that doesn't sing as well. You can always. But guess when that's going to wash? That's just going to dissipate, disappear, be nothing in the judgment. And he goes on to tell why. He says, but each one must examine his own work. Examine your own work. You know, when Paul wrote in I'll get it right in a minute, in Philippians chapter 2, where he says, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit. Empty conceit. He uses different words right here, but he's talking about the same thing. He said, each one must examine his own work, then he will have reason for boasting in regard to himself alone. You know, Paul didn't boast, but he told what he did. You know, in 2 Corinthians, he spent a lot of time defending his actions, and he had to tell what he did. He says, this boasting is getting to me. I feel like I'm going crazy boasting. But he wasn't boasting, he was just telling what the facts were. Here's what I did. We're going to stand before God with what we did. We're going to stand before God and answer for every action and every lack of action. It says, and then he'll have reason for boasting in regard to himself alone and not regard to another. You don't have to make yourself look better by somebody who's worse. Just do what we're asked to do. In Romans 12, Paul says, I urge you, brother, not to think more highly of himself than a person ought to think. I mean, that's what this is. He says, but think so as to have sound judgment. Have some basis for what you think about yourself. I know that Paul remembered doing the things that he had done. I know he remembered killing all of those Christians, but I know he wasn't guilty. I know he didn't feel guilty. He felt gratitude. Gratitude because God had done what he had done for him. Paul writes, for each one will bear his own load. The buck stops here. The one who is taught the word is to share all good things with him who teaches. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Ha, 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 ha. Gotcha. No, ain't going to happen. No way in the world we're going to pull one over on the Almighty. Whatever a man You know, this word is not male, right? This word is human. It's a silent H. You, man, whoever you are, human. Whatever a human sows, this will that human also reap. For the one human who sows to his own flesh. If you're selfish in your life, if you're tending to you and taking care of you and number one is the only one, then understand that that will be brought out when the buck stops here. He says, no one, the one who sows to the Spirit shall from the Spirit reap eternal life. That is the warranty. We look for a lifetime warranty on things. This is an eternal life warranty. If we will but listen, let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time, wait, be patient. In due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. We need stamina. I remember Coach kids had. He worked those kids so hard. They hated him. I mean, they just hated him until the playoffs. Because they were so tired every day. But during the playoffs, they outlasted everybody. They were praising him. They were acting like he was the greatest guy on earth, and they cussed him every day before that. They did not like him until they loved him. We will reap if we do not grow weary. So then while we have opportunity, there is a time when the buck is passed, when we no longer have the authority. You know when that is? That's when we breathe our last, when we give up our dealership, when it rotates to the next generation, when we no longer have an opportunity. He says, so then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who are of the household of faith. The buck stops with everyone. We can't pass it to anyone else. And the one who controls the game can't be fooled. So, what is it that we value in our lives? Do we value the fun that we have? Do we value the pleasures of this world? Do we value all of the things that the world itself determines success? Or do we value what the one who put us here tells us is valuable, who sets the standard for real value? The lesson is yours, folks. Recognize the buck stops with every one of us. Won't you come while we stand and sing the song that we have?